Hello guys, welcome back to Vision NLP Core Python Training Part 6. So today's table of content will be, we are going to, as usual, we are going to see the points which we covered last day, okay, and then we are going to see object oriented programming. Among the object oriented programming, so on last day we have watched modules, that how to what is a module, how to define a module, then how to import module, and then what is library, and how to import library or how to install a library. All these things we have covered in module chapter. Then secondly, we tried how to handle exceptions in Python. Like whenever there is like exception in while working on a list, then how we can tackle that particular exception. I showed you that using this try and except command, okay. And at the last we have seen reading and writing commands, like how to read a CSV, how to write a CSV, how to read a CSV, how to write a CSV, then how to read a Word file, and how to read and write JSON files, okay. So on today we are going to see object oriented programming. Among that object oriented programming, we will see how to define classes and objects, then what are attributes in these classes, and what is inheritance, okay. So let us get started. So what is object oriented programming? So object oriented programming, whenever we call object oriented programming, there is also short form for that, OOP, okay. So whenever you come across this term OOP, that means it is object oriented programming. So object oriented programming is which is a programming which provides a mean of structuring program so that properties and behavior are bundled into individual objects, okay. So what does this mean? Like in particular function we have some properties, that the function has some properties. It will like just print something, or it will output us, or it will provide us mean of two numbers, or it will provide us mean of a list. So this is a property or behavior of that particular function, and all these particular functions or objects are bundled. That means those are kept together into a into this structured program, okay. So this is the meaning of object oriented programming. So classes are used to create new user defined data structures, okay. So whenever we define class, or what is class exactly, so a class is that object, or it is a type of object by which we can define new data structures. Like whenever we define a data frame, and that is also a data structure, okay. So this is a form of data structure. So classes are used to create new user defined data structures that contain arbitrary information. That means that data structure can have any information, like uh, it may consider, like if we are consisting, or we are trying to store data about pets, like I have two pets, one is dog and one is cat, and I want to store its information, like what is his age, or whether it is male or female. So these type of information, so this is one, if I want to store that type of information, so so for that we can use classes, okay. Class. And what is class? The class just provides a structure. It is that means it just provides structure, or we can define a structure how we can store a data, okay. So for defining a structure we can use a class. So whenever we define a structure, there comes another concept, like how to store information, or when we store information in that particular structure, so what that information is called, okay. So that particular information in this object oriented programming is called an instance, okay. So an instance is a copy of class which has actual values. That means I have defined one class object, and if I place value of an individual into that particular object, then those values are called instance, okay. So example, a class is like defining a data structure with variables. a class is a data structure with variables name, gender, qualification and age, and when we add actual information about some students related to this same variables, then information of each and individual student will be called an instance. Okay, so I think information about instance is much more clear now. So let us define a class. So whenever we define a class, there are actually two type of classes, like one can be a parent class and a child class. Okay, so that whole term comes under the subpart inheritance, so let us leave it. So how to define a class? For defining a class, there is a keyword named class, and whatever class name we want to give, that can be given after the space. Okay, so this is the same way we define a function. Whenever we define a function, we use def keyword, and after that we use whatever the function name we want to store it. Okay, so this is the same way we can define a class also. It is a class, the keyword class, after that space, and then the name of that particular class. Okay, so in defining a class, there we don't use any parenthesis. Okay, so if we use a parenthesis, then we have to give some arguments also in that parenthesis, and that arguments can be can refer to another class, or yeah, it has to refer another class. Okay, so whenever we define a class, it is just this type of declaration. Okay, so in class there are like we can define various functions into that particular class also. So what does this means? Like we can define different functions, like I can have a print info function, then I can define a init function. So whenever we wanted to store some attributes, we wanted to define some attributes about that particular class. So for that, for defining attributes in a class, we have to use this def __ init function. Okay, and we have to make sure that whenever we are working in a class folder, so in a class object, then each and every function will have an attribute named self. Okay, like here. So what is the use of this self? By using this self, we can actually extract all these elements, or whatever we have attributes defined over into this instance in it, that all these attributes can be accessed outside this function. Okay, so for accessing whatever attributes we have defined over here outside that particular class, we have to use this self command. And if we don't use this self command, then too we will not be able to access this particular function outside this class. Okay, so we have to always make sure we have to keep this self function in while defining a class. Okay, self at self, what we call, argument. Okay, now here is my class with information about information of variables name, gender and age. These are my attributes, three basic attributes, and I will store all this information in self object. Okay, self dot name equal to name, then self dot gender equal to gender, and self dot age equal to age. So this is function this is the definition of this function init. Okay, so whenever we use double underscore while defining a function, that means that particular function is not accessible outside that particular class. Okay, so basically this is like hiding a function. So this covers the last point, how we can hide a function. Whenever we define a function with double underscore and then function name, so that means our function is not visible outside our working directory. Okay, now here we have defined this print function also. In this print info function, we are accessing whatever name we have stored or we passed previously with the attribute name. That information has got stored into the self.name function, and we are printing that information using this print statement, like print name equal to self.name. Okay, so whatever argument we pass using this particular argument, using this while we instantiate this particular class, that argument can be accessed outside that class using this print info function. So this is the declaration or defining a class. So now we will see how to instantiate that particular class. Okay, so for instantiating that class, we have to provide all the arguments that are defined into this init function. So basically there are three arguments here. You will say we can see four arguments, but you have to make sure you will never consider this self as an argument, self as an separate argument. Whatever arguments are after this self function, and that are actual arguments. Okay, so here basically we have three arguments. One is name, another is gender, and the third is age. So while instantiating a class, we have to make sure we pass these information about these three arguments. Okay, so here I have written this info, and then what is the name is Sridhar, then gender male, and then 25. Okay, and now I will store after instantiating, we will store this all this information, or the function will get assigned to this variable a. Okay, so when I run this command, now my variable a is able to extract all information or all the functions that are defined in this particular class. So here we have defined only one function, that is named print info. So we can when I run this particular command like a dot print info, so that will call this particular function a dot print info, and parameters that to that particular function is self only. So there is no need to provide an external parameters, and it will print the name of name whatever I have given. Okay, so we can change values over here like this, and then again we have to initialize that particular instantiate that particular object or class, and we can extract the same information using this a dot print info function. Okay, so this is a simple way of defining a class. Now let us define multiple instances inside that particular class. So basically this is an instance, and when we add information, these are the instance attributes. When whatever we define in this init function, that are called instance attributes. So that is a blueprint of that particular class, and whatever information we pass to that particular function, that is called as instance. Okay, so in this above example, this Joey male and 25 is an instance. Okay, so we can also define multiple instances or instance methods. Whatever function we defined into a class, that is called an instance method. Okay, so here we have defined the same class with name info, and I have given one more parameter like qualification over here, and whatever age. Okay, so these previously we had these parameters name, gender, and age. I have added one more parameter called qualification, and now we will initialize whatever information that is provided from outside this class, or while initializing this class, into this self function using self dot name, self dot gender, and self dot qualification in these parameters. Okay, so now let us define a function. Here we have defined a function which prints information about that particular person. Okay, so whenever we wanted to print information about that particular function, we can use this print command. Then these curly brackets are used to provide information, like whenever or used to provide arguments from outside that particular colon, or outside that string statements. Okay, so whatever we define in double quotation or single quotation, that is called that is considered as a string, and but I wanted to provide some information into that string. So for providing that information, we can use this dot format function. So here in this dot format, whatever the first attribute is, that will fall in this at the first place in the curly bracket, or at the point of curly bracket. Then the second attribute, whatever I have given in this dot format function or dot format statement, that will fall into this second curly bracket, and and likewise. Okay, so this is a way of printing information about printing information and initializing a string. Okay, so here I am printing the information about that particular man or particular individual. Okay, so then I have defined one more instance method which tells us about what is highest qualification of that particular individual. Okay, so for getting highest qualification, what I am printing, that we are printing highest qualification of the particular name, particular individual, is whatever the highest qualification he has achieved. Okay, so now we will run this cell. That means we have defined a class, and after defining a class we will not be able to directly access the functions defined into that class outside. Just a minute. Outside this cell. So for accessing whatever functions that are defined into this class, we have to instantiate that class with some information, or with some individuals information. Okay, so here we have instantiated this class using this info. The name of that individual is ABC. He is male and he has completed Masters of Science, and his age is 24. Okay, so this is how we have instantiated the class. So when I run this command, the class object has got instantiated into variable A. So we can access all the information or all the functions which are stored into that particular class using a dot the function name. Okay, so this is how we can call instance methods. So for calling instance methods, we have to use a dot information function. So here I have run this cell, and you can see there has to have like only two outputs, like ABC is male. ABC is male with age 24. So this was the information I was trying to print in this information function, that dot 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 is a whatever gender and with age this. Okay, and in the second print line we are trying to access his highest qualification. So the highest qualification is, we are printing highest qualification of ABC is Masters of Science. Okay, and there after this line there is none printed over here. So why this particular none is printed over here? Because we are the function named highest qualification is not returning anything. Okay, so basically the output of this print statement, the output of this whole function a dot highest qualification is none. It is not returning anything. It is just printing some information inside that function, but it is not returning anything. So output of this whole function is none, and we are printing that output. So so the third printing has been done like none. So when I remove this print function, we can see, oh sorry, we can see the none output has got removed. Okay, so let us move on to the third type in object oriented programming, that is Python object and inheritance. What is inheritance in OOP? So inheritance is a process by which one class takes on the attributes or methods of another class. Okay, so basically consider there are two classes, like class A and class B. Now we have defined like 4 functions in this class A, and we wanted to access these 4 functions in by using class or inside the class B. So for that there is some way of defining that particular class B, and by defining that way only we can access all the information of class A into class B. Okay, so this particular method is called inheritance. Okay, so newly formed in this particular procedure, a class A will be called a parent class, and the class B which is dependent on class A. So that's why the class B will be called a child class. Okay, so let us define a same function. Here we have defined a class info function. I have copied all these things from our above function. So it is the same function which is having information about an individual with about his name, about gender, then qualification and age. And we are printing this information using information function, and we are just printing information like name is that ABC is a male with age whatever, and we are also printing highest qualification. Okay, so now let us define a child class. Like I said it owner, but we can have the name like child over here. Okay, so this is my child class, and so what is exactly difference between definition of this parent class and child class? While defining a parent class, here we can you can see that after this class we have not used, after this class declaration statement, we have not used any parenthesis. Okay, so this is just a statement called class info. This is the only statement, and in this second declaration we have accessed this above class in the second class. Okay, so in our child class or whatever new class, we are accessing information about this info class. So that's why in parenthesis we have given this argument info. Okay, and now let us define a one more like instance, child instance method we can call it. Like this can be called an instance method. Instance method of child class is it is printing child information, and or it is printing about what is the child name only. Okay, so here we can save it as child name, and when we run this particular command, we have declared all our parent class as well as child class. Now where we can how to instantiate this child class. For instantiating this child class, we have to provide all the parameters, or all the all the parameters that are required in the parent class. Okay, so basically in parent class we there was need of four attributes named name, gender, qualification and age. So while instantiating this child class also, we have to provide all these four attributes. Okay, so I have provided here all the four attributes. The attribute is child is Jim with male, and master what is his highest qualification, that is masters, and what is his age, that age is 25. Okay, and we have instantiated all these objects in ABC ABC variable. Okay, so this is instantiating a object. Then like now I have instantiated this child object only, and I want to call a function which is of this info class. Okay, so for that we can use the same method like abc dot whatever function we wanted to call, that can be typed and then use open and close parenthesis. Okay, so if there is any argument for that particular function, then we have to provide that argument. But if there is no any argument, or if there is only self argument, then we can only keep this open and close parenthesis. Okay, so when we call this particular abc.information function, we are actually getting information, or we are actually calling a function which is from parent class. Okay, so another way of we will also call a function which is which is of parent class, like abc dot, there was this function, this highest qualification. Now here previously I have instantiated this whole class in this abc. So whenever I am trying to access functions or instance methods that are defined in parent class, we have to give just initials of that particular function. Like I wanted to access a highest qualification, so for that I can use this only HIG only, and then if I press this tab button, it will automatically type the function name highest qualification. Okay, so the function is so and if this particular function is not getting typed by its own, that means there is some spelling mistake or there is some declaration fault, and or there can be like that function is not defined previously and you are yet trying to access that function. So when we call such a function, there that can cause an error. Okay, so you this is a good interface to know whether a function is called or not. Now I will call this function with open and close parentheses. I will not give any arguments, and here we can see highest qualification of gym is a is masters. Okay, now here we can see that we have access to all the functions that are defined in parent class, but can we actually access the function which is defined in it in the child class itself? Okay, so for that that can also be done. So for that also we can use this abc dot function, and then whatever function name that has got defined, like here I had given this child information function. So yeah, child name function. So whenever I type chi and then tab button, then here you can see this child information or child name function is typed, and then we can call it. Okay, so this is all about this is like little information about classes. Whenever you go in depth in using classes, so it is really vast. So here I will show you how to provide default values. Okay, so one more thing, like whenever we define a class or whenever we want to instantiate a class, we have to make sure we provide all the attributes that are in parent class. Okay, so here there are 4 attributes. Now if I miss a attribute, like if I miss this 4th attribute, so it will throw an error named missing one required positional argument named age. Okay, so you can you will get to know whenever this type of error happens, you have to know that one positional argument is missing. So one attribute you have missed to send. Okay, so here that attribute is 25. Attributes are separated with commas again. Now how to define or how to provide an default value to a particular attribute. Okay, so consider if there is an organization and that organization is storing information about their candidates or their peoples. So that organization can have all the candidates which have qualified or whose highest qualification is masters. Okay, so here we can keep a default value for this qualification in qualification attribute, and that default value will be masters. Okay, now if I run this particular command, so actually we can't give a default non-default argument follows default argument. Okay, so what does this error means? Like let us change a little bit. I'm not exactly sure about that particular error. Like if I instantiate or provide a default value to age, is this error happening? No. So that particular error meant or the meaning of that particular error was non-default argument follows default argument. Okay, so what does this mean exactly? Whenever we are providing a default argument, that default argument should be at the last whenever we are defining some parameters. Okay, so if I cut this whole thing and keep it at last, that after age, so this error will not be there or will not be present. Okay, and when I run this whole command, here we can see there is no error. Now in such type of instantiating or such type of class declaration, there is no need to provide a qualification except the qualification of that particular candidate is other than masters. Okay, so someone has completed his PhD, so for that we can provide that PhD attribute from outside. If he has not completed a PhD, or if that qualification is not different, then we can just keep the whole thing in blank space. Okay, so here if I send only this information, there will not be any error. And if I wanted to tell that Jim has completed PhD, so for that we can use this or yeah, PhD, I will write only that this thing. And now if we get highest information about this Jim, so that information is PhD. And if I don't provide any argument about this Jim particular this particular individual, so highest qualification of that individual will be masters, because the default value of that individual or default value of qualification for each and every individual is masters. Okay, so this is all about inheritance. This is all about like object oriented programming. So guys, we are stopping here, and in tomorrow's lecture we will see regular expressions, basic information about regular expressions, then a little bit about pandas library and numpy library. Okay, so thank you guys, thank you for attending the class.